Mr. Bowen, we have spent nearly $100 billion in Afghanistan already. However, we continue to make some of the same mistakes as we've done in Iraq. One of the lessons learned from your testimony that you pointed out is that we should begin rebuilding only after establishing sufficient security. Given the fact, as Mr. Kinzinger pointed out, that we have seen press reports this morning that the President is considering leaving no troops in Afghanistan after our withdrawal in 2014, how will this security vacuum impact our reconstruction efforts in Afghanistan based on the lessons learned in Iraq?
I think my interview with Secretary Panetta on this point shed some light on the decision-making with regard to the withdrawal from Iraq vis-a-vis what is occurring in Afghanistan. And Secretary Panetta said to me that the inability to negotiate a basis for a continuing U.S. military presence in the post-2011 Strategic Framework Agreement left the United States without important leverage in Iraq. This weakened American capacity to push for greater change within the government of Iraq. That's a lesson, I would say, from the Iraq experience, from Secretary Panetta's perspective, a one that should be listened carefully to. And thus, as we look forward to Afghanistan, that lesson ought to be kept in mind because the truth is the last quarter in Iraq has been the most devastating quarter since the summer of 2008. A lot of causes for that, certainly what's going on in Syria, but the rule of law certainly is not under control in Iraq at this moment.
And speaking of Syria, due to that ongoing bloody conflict, the infrastructure in Syria needs will continue to increase, and the U.S. might be asked to assist in Syria's reconstruction efforts in the near future. Looking beyond Afghanistan, what would you suggest, either one of you, our plan should be for a post-Assad Syria within the parameters of reconstruction efforts, and how much cost would be involved? Can you envision what those could be and what many mistakes might be repeated there?
At a minimum, we should be actively planning for participating in a multilateral stabilization and reconstruction operation in a post-Assad Syria. We should be planning now. We should have been planning for a while. Indeed, the UN, under former Syrian Minister Dari, is doing that now, and he's publicly expressed some frustration at the lack of multilateral engagement on the point. It's impossible to project the cost, but we do know the devastation in Syria is massive, and thus the stabilization and rebuilding of the country will take time. But what should be clearly on the table, and would be if there was a USOCO in existence now, is identifying the contractors, the personnel, the IT system, the oversight, how money would be managed, the controls, just to put a general rubric over it, to ensure that we avert fraud, waste, and abuse of the kind that we saw in Iraq and that we've seen in Afghanistan.
Mr. Ambassador.
I agree with Stuart that we should be planning now. We should have begun planning long ago for a possible engagement in Syria after the Assad regime falls. Whether or not we actually do that depends on many things. For example, whether the government that appears after Assad is one that's friendly to us. But we don't know, and we should be planning now for that contingency. I believe there has been some planning being done by the Office of Conflict Stabilization and Operations at the State Department for this, but I don't know how comprehensive it has been. And certainly, as Stuart said, it needs to be done in conjunction with what's being done by the UN.
And speaking, if I could interrupt you, you talk about the Bureau of Conflict and Stabilization Operations was established in November of 2011, and this bureau was preceded by the organization that you led, the Office of Coordination for Reconstruction and Stabilization. And even though the Bureau concentrates more on small crises, do you believe that we should increase the capacity of the existing Bureau within the State Department, or establish a new center, which you propose, called the U.S. Office for Contingency Operations? And wouldn't there be more redundancy and duplicative efforts between those two entities?
I think there is the possibility for duplication if USOCO is established. But here's how I look at this. The core of a successful stabilization operation on the civilian side consists of, first, planning, secondly, an integrated core of government professionals. And what you have in CSO right now is, I think, an able planning capacity and a small, competent staff, but there's no larger interagency core of professionals to do this work properly. A conscious decision was taken to reduce that core. Conceivably, it could be redone in that office, or conceivably be done with Stewart's proposal for USOCO. There does not seem to be an interest right now in the State Department for doing that. And even when I was in charge of the SCRS office at State, while we were building this, there did not seem to be a readiness on the part of the rest of the building to use it. It was something of a foreign entity in the State Department.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for good answers, and Mr. Deutsch is recognized for his questioning period.